Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really significant and, well, evolving area, understanding autism and neurodiversity.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we've gathered some fascinating material to explore.
Yeah, we've got research looking at different views on autism, the lived experiences of autistic adults,
Mm.
and also a policy briefing that really gets into the nitty-gritty of support for neurodivergent kids and young people.
So our aim in this deep dive is basically to give you a clear picture of what's happening in this field.
Right.
We want to unpack the current ways we understand these things, the very real struggles people face trying to get support,
Yeah.
and also some of the kind of emerging perspectives coming directly from the autistic and neurodivergent communities themselves.
It's definitely complex, and it feels like it's changing all the time.
It really is. So we're here to sort of guide you through the key insights.
Okay, let's dive in then. How we even think about autism seems to have undergone a major shift, right?
Absolutely. A huge shift. For a long, long time, the main way of understanding autism was through what's known as the deficit-based medical model.
The medical model.
Yeah. And this perspective, which some of our sources touch on, it essentially framed autism mainly around what were seen as shortcomings, social, behavioral things that needed to be fixed or improved.
So the focus was on what someone couldn't do, basically, like limitations?
Exactly. The core idea was that disability came from individual deficits, things that needed correction so the person could function, better in society's eyes.
But then came the neurodiversity movement, which kind of flips that whole idea on its head.
Completely flips it, yeah. This movement, which really started gaining momentum back in the 90s,
Right.
it puts forward this idea that autism is, well, simply a natural variation in how human brains work.
Like any other kind of human difference.
Just like any other difference, it emphasizes that these neurological differences aren't deficits at all. They're actually a valuable part of the diversity of human experience.
So they should be accepted, respected.
Exactly. Accepted and respected. Think of it like the difference between saying someone has a problem with their vision versus just acknowledging they see differently and might need glasses sometimes.
That's a helpful analogy. And is that where the term neurodivergence fits in?
Yes, precisely. Our policy briefing defines neurodivergence as describing individuals whose brain development and function differ from what's considered typical in society.
Okay.
It's a broad term, really covers a wide range of cognitive styles. And you'll hear related terms too, like neurodiversity itself.
Which is about the overall diversity of brains in a population.
Spot on. And neurotypical, that's used to describe those whose neurological function aligns with what society generally expects.
Got it. So less normal versus abnormal, more just a spectrum of brain types. But the briefing also mentioned that the language is still a bit inconsistent.
That's a really critical point, actually.
Yeah.
While this neurodiversity perspective is getting more traction, the official diagnostic manuals we use.
Like the ICD and DSM.
Yeah, exactly. The ICD-11 and the DSM-5, plus some legal stuff, they still often categorize many neurodivergent conditions as disorders.
Huh. So there's a bit of a clash there.
There is. It shows how our understanding is still evolving, and the words we use are catching up. It also highlights that tension between the social model of disability, society creating barriers, and the medical model focusing on impairment.
Right. Like, is the issue the person's sensory sensitivity or the lack of quiet spaces?
Precisely. It depends on the lens you're using.
Okay, so we've got these shifting ways of understanding autism. What's the practical impact on autistic adults and their support systems? It sounds like actually getting help is a huge challenge.
It truly is a major one. Our research really highlights that autistic adults and the people supporting them often find the formal systems just incredibly difficult to navigate.
And that starts right from diagnosis.
Often, yes. There's a real information gap about what services are even out there and, crucially, how you actually access them.
So people don't know what to ask for.
Exactly. As one participant put it so powerfully, I really don't know what to ask for. I'm unsure what's available and what will help me.
Wow. That lack of clarity must be so frustrating. People could miss out on vital support.
They do, simply because they don't know it exists or how the process works.
And it's not just knowing what's there, is it? I mean, actually applying for funding sounds like a massive task in itself.
Oh, absolutely. Even when people were aware of things like government funding schemes, the process, proving eligibility, constant documentation, It can be incredibly stressful, a huge administrative burden.
Right.
One support person we heard from talked about the immense effort involved, feeling like they were constantly having to educate therapists on how to do their jobs properly.
That paints a picture of a system that's just not user-friendly at all. And there's that feeling you mentioned that some autistic adults almost get overlooked.
Yeah, that's a recurring and really concerning theme.
Mm.
This perception that autistic adults can be seen as both too disabled and not disabled enough.
What does that mean exactly?
It can happen when someone's outward abilities, maybe they're very articulate, for example,
Mm.
don't seem to match the significant underlying support needs they actually have. Like maybe with executive function, planning, organizing daily life.
Right, so the difficulties aren't always obvious.
Exactly. And that discrepancy can make it really hard to qualify for support based on, the standard criteria.
So what is it that people are really looking for? What kind of support do they need after getting a diagnosis?
Overwhelmingly, what came through was a strong need for more information, clear advice, and skilled professional guidance right after diagnosis.
Someone to help them make sense of it all.
Yes, someone to help them understand the often really complex processes for accessing different types of support. A clear starting point.
Like a guide.
Exactly. As one support person put it so well, they need somebody who could walk you through some of the processes. Somebody to give you a starting point to go, you know what? I've been there.
Yeah, that shared experience, that practical guidance must be invaluable.
Absolutely.
Okay, so when people do manage to connect with good professional support, what kind of positive impact does that have?
Well, the research strongly emphasizes the value of support that is specifically autism informed.
Meaning the professionals really understand autism.
Deeply understand it. They can help individuals understand their own unique strengths and challenges, develop practical coping strategies, and adapt therapeutic approaches for things like co-occurring mental health conditions, which are pretty common.
Right.
And support persons also said these knowledgeable professionals gave them crucial insights into the autistic adult's behaviors, which helped them respond much more effectively.
So it's about working with people who truly get it. And it sounds like the support needed goes beyond just like therapy sessions too.
Oh, definitely. There's a big need for more holistic support, services that really focus on fostering independence and, meaningful participation in the community.
Like help with everyday tasks
Mm-hmm.
or getting involved in things.
Exactly. Practical assistance, support attending social events, guidance with education, help finding and keeping a job, all that stuff.
And that sounds particularly vital for those who might also have intellectual disabilities.
Yes, that comprehensive support is crucial there. They might benefit hugely from support workers helping them get out and about, things like that.
Okay. What about social connections? That often comes up when talking about autism, the challenges, but also the goals people might have.
It's interesting. While a few people in the research weren't focused on increasing social connections, most actually expressed a desire to connect more easily with others.
And what kind of advice did they get on that?
It varied quite a bit.
Yeah.
Some got simple, almost rule-based guidance, do this, don't do that.
Like a script.
Kind of. Others got more in-depth explanations of the underlying social dynamics, and that latter type was generally seen as much more helpful.
Why was that?
Because it allowed for a deeper understanding of why certain social behaviors happen, rather than just, superficially copying them.
Ah, understanding the why makes sense.
Yeah, as one participant said, understanding the why made all the difference.
So grasping the principles, not just memorizing lines. And ultimately, what are autistic adults hoping to achieve through the support they get? What's the end goal?
The research really highlights this fundamental desire for acceptance from others,
Okay.
combined with support that helps them move towards their own individual goals.
Defined by them.
Yes. Autistic adults want professionals to approach them with a positive understanding, treat them as equal partners. And crucially, they want to define the goals of their support based on their own values and needs.
Which might be different from what society expects.
Often are. One participant put it so powerfully. It is essential for support services to be directed by my values and my priorities, not what my spouse wants or my parents or my doctor. It's about what I want.
Wow. That sense of self-determination, autonomy, that feels incredibly important.
That's paramount.
Okay. Now let's talk about understanding and acceptance, not just from professionals, but from, the wider community, family, friends.
Right. Diagnosis itself can actually be a really powerful tool for fostering that understanding.
How so?
It can give autistic adults a framework, a language, to explain their experiences and needs to others. And that can often lead to increased understanding and better informal support.
Like helping people understand why someone might avoid eye contact?
Exactly. One participant shared how disclosing their autism helped them feel okay about avoiding eye contact, which actually made communication much less stressful for them.
But it's not always a positive experience disclosing a diagnosis, is it? It can bring its own challenges.
Sadly, no, it's not always positive. The research also points to times when disclosing led to negative reactions, some people even questioning the diagnosis.
Seriously? Why?
Maybe because the individual didn't fit their stereotype of autism, didn't have obvious outward difficulties, and that kind of dismissal, it can really contribute to social isolation.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like that quote, people just said I was making it up or looking for an excuse. That's rough.
It really is, and it just underscores how much more work is needed to build genuine autism awareness and acceptance in the broader community.
Absolutely. People need a more nuanced view.
Both autistic adults and their supporters strongly feel the community needs a more positive understanding, needs to reject those harmful stereotypes.
Is there any sign of things improving?
Well, there was a little glimmer of optimism. One participant noticed a more positive, accepting attitude towards neurodiversity among younger people, which is definitely encouraging.
That's good to hear. And it's not just the public, is it? The people, closest families, support persons, they often go through their own journey of understanding after a diagnosis, too.
That's a very insightful point, yes. After a diagnosis, there's often this reciprocal process of understanding and adjustment between the autistic adult and their immediate network.
So it takes time for everyone.
It can. While some supporters accept it readily, others might struggle initially. Maybe they don't want to label their loved one or see it as an impairment.
Right.
But often, with more information and a deeper understanding of autism, acceptance follows. And this understanding can lead to reframing past behaviors, seeing them as related to autism, not personal failings.
Like the mother you mentioned who became an advocate.
Exactly. She was resistant at first, but learning more helped her understand her child better and become a strong supporter.
It sounds like it requires a real willingness to learn and shift perspective from everyone involved. And communication styles must be huge here.
Absolutely fundamental. Adapting communication is key.
How so?
Well, for example, the very direct communication style autistic people often use can sometimes be misinterpreted as blunt by neurotypical people.
And vice versa. Indirect communication might be confusing.
Precisely. It can be missed entirely. So the research highlights how clear, direct communication can really reduce misunderstandings and improve relationships.
And support persons can help bridge that gap sometimes.
Yes, they often play an important role in helping navigate complex social situations, sometimes acting as a kind of social translator, as one participant put it, and connecting with professional services too.
Okay. Moving on to learning and work. It seems like the mainstream workplace often presents pretty big obstacles for autistic individuals.
Yes, sadly. Many shared experiences of facing considerable challenges in mainstream jobs, often due to a lack of adequate support and understanding from employers or colleagues.
Even if companies say they're inclusive.
Sometimes the reality doesn't match the policy. The actual accommodations might be insufficient for someone to really thrive.
And what about the alternative, like disability enterprises?
Well, some who worked in those settings found them lacking in stimulation. They felt they weren't using their full skills.
So it's a tough balance, overwhelming versus understimulating.
Exactly. As one person said, the mainstream workplace could be overwhelming, while the disability enterprise felt like my brain was going to sleep.
It's a real dilemma, wanting meaningful work, but not always finding the right environment or support. But the research also highlights unique strengths autistic individuals bring, right?
That's such a vital point, yes. Many autistic adults themselves talked about their exceptional attention to detail, their ability to focus intensely, their strong adherence to rules.
Valuable workplace skills.
Absolutely. Huge assets.
Yeah.
And there's a real hope that employers will increasingly recognize and value these unique skills.
That people will see the contribution they can make.
Yes. As one person said, I think people are starting to see that we're not just a problem to be solved, but that we actually bring something valuable to the table.
That's a great perspective. Now let's explore the power of community. Connecting with other autistic people sounds incredibly valuable.
Oh, immensely so. Autistic adults consistently emphasized how much they valued connecting with other autistic people, whether face-to-face or online.
Why is that connection so important?
It fosters this deep sense of being understood and accepted, a feeling they didn't always get from neurotypical interactions.
Less effort involved.
Exactly. They often reported it was less mentally and emotionally draining because of shared ways of thinking and communicating. Like one person beautifully put it, for the first time, I felt like I could just be myself.
Finding your tribe, as another participant said. And it's more than just social connection, isn't it? It offers practical help, too.
Indeed. Autistic peers are a crucial source of practical knowledge and advice, especially for newly diagnosed people trying to figure things out.
Sharing coping strategies, resources.
Exactly. Peer support based on lived experience. It really strengthens that sense of belonging and helps build a positive autistic identity.
But are these communities always a perfect fit for every autistic person?
That's a fair question. The research acknowledges that even within the autistic community, connecting can sometimes have challenges.
Because people are still individuals.
Precisely. Differences in specific traits, interests, support needs. It can sometimes make finding that complete sense of belonging tricky.
Any specific examples?
Well, some women mentioned feeling less understood in mostly male groups, and concerns were raised about whether online spaces always meet the needs of those with intellectual disabilities or higher support needs.
It really highlights the diversity within neurodiversity. It's not monolithic.
Exactly.
Okay, let's consider identity. How does getting an autism diagnosis impact someone's sense of self?
For many, it's a really significant catalyst for self-discovery, a big moment.
How so?
It provides a framework for understanding lifelong differences. It can lead to a deeper, more compassionate understanding of their own identity and their relationship with the world.
And self-acceptance plays a big role.
Crucial. It often helps reduce years of self-blame, fostering a more positive view. Like that participant who said it helped them realize things weren't all my fault, but related to how their brain worked.
That's powerful, gaining a new lens to view yourself through. But is it always about pure acceptance, or is there still sometimes a desire for change or growth?
That's a delicate balance. Perspectives really vary. Some might focus on changing their environment to suit them better,
Right.
while others might focus more on learning new skills or coping mechanisms. But the overall feeling seems to be that self-acceptance can and should coexist with wanting positive change and personal development.
Does the importance of autism in someone's identity change over time?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
The salience or prominence of that autistic identity can shift. For some, it might strengthen as they connect more with the community and deepen into their self-understanding. For others, it might become less central as they integrate it into their broader sense of self. It's a very personal journey.
It really does sound like a deeply individual process. And finally, on identity, there's this interesting thread, feeling a strong belonging with other autistic people, but also feeling quite different from the neurotypical world.
Yes, that's a powerful sentiment that came through strongly. Participants often described a clear distinction between autistic and non-autistic people, different groups almost.
Leading to feelings of alienation sometimes.
It can, yes, feeling like you don't quite fit in with mainstream society.
Yeah.
But importantly, that sense of difference was often coupled with a really strong desire for mutual understanding and genuine connection with neurotypical individuals.
Not just tolerance, but understanding.
Exactly. As one person said, we just want to be understood, not just tolerated.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit to the policy side. That PSC note briefing really shone a light on some big systemic challenges in healthcare and education, didn't it?
It certainly did. It highlights a really concerning trend. A significant rise in identifying neurodivergent conditions, like autism, which is putting huge pressure on health services, leading to increased demand and, frankly, alarmingly long waiting times.
For diagnosis and support.
Both. For instance, one big study suggested about 3% of kids aged 10-14 in the UK are thought to be autistic, and we're seeing similar trends for ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia.
And it seems like who gets identified and supported isn't always fair either.
Tragically, no. There are significant, persistent disparities based on gender, socioeconomic background, ethnicity.
So some groups are missed more often.
It seems so. Boys are diagnosed with autism more often than girls,
Yeah.
statistically. And kids from lower socioeconomic backgrounds or minority ethnic groups seem more likely to have undiagnosed conditions.
Which must have long-term consequences.
Absolutely. Poorer health outcomes, lower educational attainment, even more interaction with the criminal justice system down the line.
The briefing also pointed to problems within the healthcare system itself, fragmented pathways.
Yes, the routes to get a diagnosis and support are often really fragmented, inconsistent, and vary hugely depending on where you live.
Postcode lottery.
Very much so. It creates huge barriers. And there's also this issue of diagnostic overshadowing.
What's that?
It's where having one identified condition means other co-occurring conditions get missed, so the support isn't complete.
And even getting that initial diagnosis, it's crucial but not always smooth sailing.
No. While technically in some places you don't legally need a formal diagnosis for basic SEN support in schools.
SEM being special educational needs.
Right. But in practice, you often do need that diagnosis to get more comprehensive support, like an education, health, and care plan, an EHCP.
Okay.
And the briefing details this massive increase in referrals for autism assessments, with most kids not being seen within the recommended 3-month NICE guideline.
Same issues for ADHD too.
Similar pressures, long waiting lists.
Yeah. And the support needed after diagnosis. That's just as critical, but sounds just as hard to get quickly.
Absolutely. Even with a diagnosis, families face inaccessible waits for essential therapies, speech and language, occupational therapy, mental health support.
Right.
We've even seen medication shortages impacting things, like with ADHD meds recently. And again, availability often depends heavily on where you live. That postcode lottery strikes again.
Turning to education now, the SEN system, Special Educational Needs and Disabilities, that's meant to provide support in schools, but it sounds like it's facing major challenges too.
It is. There are two main levels, SEN support within schools and the more intensive EHCPs. Both have increased since 2016.
And autistic kids are more likely to need EHCPs.
Yes, they're the most likely group, which shows the level of need. But worryingly, there's also been a big rise in tribunals appeals against EHCP decisions.
And many of those involve autistic children.
A disproportionately high number, yes. Plus, neurodivergent kids face higher rates of school suspension and exclusion.
That's concerning. Is funding part of the problem?
It seems to be a major underlying issue. Widespread concerns about inadequate SEN funding, a real mismatch between the rising demand and the resources available.
Leading back to that postcode lottery of support.
Exactly. What a child gets can depend hugely on their local authorities' budget and priorities.
And finally, the briefing mentioned challenges with sort of joined-up thinking, disjointed pathways and staff training.
Yes. Getting effective support is often hampered by poor coordination between education, health, social care, all the different agencies, pretty much. And there's a widely recognized need for better, more consistent training for staff in both education and healthcare, so they really understand and can support neurodivergent individuals effectively.
And transitions between services sound tricky, too.
Very tricky. Moving from child to adult services, or school to uni, or work. These points are often where support falls through the cracks.
It really paints a picture of systems under immense strain, needing significant improvement. So, looking ahead, what policy ideas are being discussed to fix this?
Well, the briefing really emphasizes co-production.
Meaning involving neurodivergent people themselves.
Exactly. Actively involving them, their families, professionals in designing and delivering services. It's seen as critical.
Makes sense. What else?
There's a strong push for more streamlined, integrated pathways across health and education, maybe integrated neurodevelopmental teams, providing more holistic support.
Joining things up better.
Yes. And finally, ensuring greater accountability from service providers, making sure they actually deliver what's needed. That's seen as essential for improving outcomes.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together, we've really explored this huge shift in understanding autism, moving towards neurodiversity acceptance. But alongside that, these massive persistent challenges people face just trying to get the right support when they need it throughout their lives.
They're real challenges.
Often made worse by these systemic problems in healthcare and education, the long waits, the inconsistencies, the inequities.
Yeah.
So it seems crystal clear that going forward, we absolutely have to keep listening to and centering the voices and experiences of autistic people and the whole neurodivergent community.
That's the only way to shape support systems and policies that actually work, that are effective and equitable.
Precisely. The key themes really are that evolving understanding, the critical, often unmet need for support, and those big systemic barriers. Bridging that gap between understanding and effective person-centered action. That feels like the crucial task now.
Well said.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Reflecting on all these complexities and the clear need for more inclusive, understanding communities, what single systemic change do you think would have the most profound positive impact on the lives of artistic individuals and the wider neurodivergent population?
That's a great question to ponder.
Definitely. And we encourage you to maybe explore local advocacy groups, look into research initiatives in your own areas. Just keep delving into this vital and constantly evolving topic. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.